So we know about a commercial on YouTube. It's called Popcorners Breaking Good. I guess it's a YouTube video, but it's for a commercial for a snack called Popcorners. And so in the title they say Popcorners, and then there's like a colon, and then it says Breaking Good. And so obviously it's supposed to be kind of a spin-off of Breaking Bad, which is an absolutely perfect TV show, which you would be stupid not to invest the time in. And so anyway, we're looking at a 1 minute long YouTube video, 1 minute long YouTube commercial in which Jesse tries one of these popcorner chips, which are laid out on a pan, kind of like a pan that might be used for cooking meth. But this time, instead of, it being used for cooking meth like in Breaking Bad, apparently it's being used for cooking popcorners here in this Breaking Good commercial. So basically we have a situation where the commercial starts with just being underneath a layer of these popcorners. And so you can't really see anything until Jesse is sweeping through this layer of popcorners on this cooking pan. And then he will eat one of the chips. He will try one of the chips for the first time, which is assumes to have been mostly cooked by Walter White, who's kind of sitting about 15 feet away and just watching Jesse try out these chips. So we think that Walter White has been cooking, mostly responsible for the production of these new popcorners, kind of similar to how he was mostly responsible for the production of this cool new blue meth, right, that's now hitting the streets. And this commercial is supposed to be in relation to the time when Walt and Jesse are working with Tuco Salamanca. So right before season 1, episode 7, which I think is called Crazy Handful of Nothing. So it's in episodes, it's right before episode 7, right? We could think about like maybe episode 6.5, right? So something that would be like when Walter and Jesse have already begun a business relationship with Tuco Salamanca. This would be right before they would have their transaction with him, in which Nodos would be basically assaulted by Tuco for speaking out of order, for insulting or threatening Walter, right? So we're thinking about a time when this is a relatively new business relationship. This is after Jesse has been beaten up by Tuco, but then remember Walter followed up by throwing the fulminated mercury in Tuco's office, right? Tuco thought that it was a piece of meth, and Walt said something like, oh, we're going to sell this, or I got something cool to show you. And then remember that Walter throws that mercury through Tuco's office, which creates this big explosion. So it's after that, but before they had this transaction where Nodo says, just remember who you're working for, to Walt, right? After they do the transaction. And then Tuco's like, why the fuck are you speaking to Walter like that? Like, you don't think I can fucking defend myself? So anyway, that's kind of where the point in this commercial is. So anyway, that's how this 1 minute video starts, is it will be Jesse panning through these chips on this pan, just kind of waving his fingers through it, and then he will try one of these chips. He bites into it, and it's a nice crunch. We're thinking about like a yellow triangular chip, and I have it paused on my computer now. It'll be the white cheddar flavor. So I imagine this is a pretty delicious chip. But in this commercial, it's kind of a joke, right? We're thinking about a Breaking Bad universe and Breaking Bad adaptation of a Popcorners commercial, and so that's why it's called Breaking Good. It's supposed to remove all the drug references, but then it kind of jokingly replaces all the references to meth with references to this Popcorners chip. So he is trying one of these chips, and he says something to Walter White, like, oh my God, Mr. White, these are the bomb. And he is really impressed with him. Like, oh yeah, these are the bomb, yo. And like talking like Jesse Pinkman would in Breaking Bad. And then Walter's like, okay, calm down. It's not that many ingredients. And then Walter is passionate about not having Jesse eat too many of the chips, because he says something like, oh, we make them, we don't use our product, or something like that. Same to how in Breaking Bad, right? Walter wouldn't want Jesse smoking all the meth, right? The goal would be to sell it so they can actually make money from it, so Walter can actually provide for his family. So in the joke here, it would be as though Walter wants to provide for his family by selling these popcorners, and that's why he doesn't want Jesse eating too many of these popcorners, despite how delicious Jesse apparently finds the popcorners. So they have a tentative customer base at this point, right? Jesse's clearly very impressed, and Walt's proud of his product as well, right? We're talking about this delicious new popcorner chip, akin to how they were impressed with Walter's new meth. Apparently, he's not just good at meth, he's good at cooking, baking these snacks as well, which are legal and sold in supermarkets today. So then, eventually, they tag up with Tuco Salamanca. And so remember, this commercial is kind of in the context of when Walt and Jesse have just started working with Tuco, right? They had they haven't had the transaction yet where No Dose dies, but this is after the situation where Walter throws the mercury, right? So now Tuco is kind of linked up with Walt, right? They're kind of like eye to eye, right? Because, Tuco kind of threatened Walt and Jesse by assaulting Walt and Jesse because Jesse didn't want to float $35,000 worth of product before being paid. And then Walt followed up by throwing the mercury. So now they're essentially even, right? They're not like under Tuco's nest anymore, basically. But you will have a situation where Walt and Jesse tag up with Tuco to see if Tuco likes the chip. And he says something like, "What are these?" And Jesse's like, "They're called popcorners, yo," or something like that. And then Walt's immediately like, "Say their name," right? Akin to how much later in the TV show, Walter White would say to Declan kind of threateningly, "Say my name," right? And then it would occur to Declan that the man standing in front of him is this I don't know if I would say decorated in the same way that Hank is decorated with all these DEA things, but very respected and well admired in the cartel, Heisenberg, right? And so, holy shit, you're Heisenberg, right? And so, same way, say their name, like, respect this fucking chip. And Tuco's like, "Oh, wow, popcorners, these are the bomb." And then jokingly you say something like, "We're going to eat a lot of snacks together," and kind of psychotically laughing, akin to how Tuco would later say in the next episode, "We're going to make a lot of money together," right, with that transaction. And then that's the point where No Dose says, "Just remember who you're working for." And then Tuco doesn't like that and follows up lethally. So we could pretend that this awesome 60-second return to Breaking Bad, right? It's almost like a whole nother episode, tiny micro episode of Breaking Bad, where we get more Walter and more Jesse Pinkman, kind of how we got more Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, right? We have that episode where it's literally awesome, right? We go right back to Saul Goodman being, trapped by Walter and Jesse, and then he's shoved into the RV, and they're talking about making meth together. And I think in Better Call Saul, maybe they could have done a slightly better job doing their best to be similar to if it had actually been a Breaking Bad scene. I think the one gap that they had is that Aaron Paul's voice was way too deep. I know he got older and everything, but when he was trying to imitate Jesse, he's like, "Oh yeah, let's cook meth," rather than in Breaking Bad when Aaron Paul's younger, we have a Jesse's like, "Oh yeah, let's cook meth, yo," right? His voice is higher, and you can make that observation, but it's still so much fun to watch a little bit of Breaking Bad in Better Call Saul. And the same thing with a TV commercial. I know it's only 60 seconds, but it's still such a fun 60 seconds to come back to Breaking Bad a little bit and to be able to make a joke about it. Right now, instead of talking about meth, we're talking about popcorners, which is a chip that's legal and safe, and we can actually access it in supermarkets and be thrilled by how delicious this chip is, apparently, kind of similar to how thrilled meth heads are by Walter White's blue meth in Breaking Bad. Hence the Breaking Good commercial, popcorners. So we can pretend that this is part of an actual Breaking Bad episode called Breaking Good. It's nestled between Season 1, Episode 6, and Season 1, Episode 7, right? So you could call it Season 1, Episode 6.5, or Season 1, Episode 6A. In this episode, Walter is driving around downtown Albuquerque, still acclimating to and gaining pride in his bald cut. Jesse Pinkman smokes a boatload of the blue stuff with Brandon Mayhew and Skinny Pete. Recall that this would have been before Walt had become insistent with Jesse about not consuming the meth that they would produce, right? Remember, he got a little louder about that, right? You don't fucking use our product. You need to be selling it, right? It's not for us to consume. It's for other people to consume. And in doing that, we will actually make money rather than just getting high, which makes this whole thing pointless. So Jesse's smoking with Brandon and Skinny, right? We could think about Badger and Skinny Pete, right? So recall that this would have been before Walt had become insistent with Jesse about not consuming the meth they produced. Sisters Skylar and Marie have gotten into a brief argument in which Marie claims recalling a 15-year-old Sky once stealing a Snickers bar from a supermarket with a boyfriend at the time. It's as though Marie is trying to defend her own kleptomania, right? Stealing the tiara for the new baby gift for Holly, by saying, "Oh, look, sister, you stealed a Snickers bar." And so Marie says something like, "Oh, I recall, Sky, when you were 15 years old and you stole that Snickers bar from the supermarket with your boyfriend. What was his name?" But Skylar denies it and shoves it off, claiming that Marie has no integrity and lies, steals, and cheats whenever she gets a chance. And you can tell that her breath is getting fairly heated. This causes Hank, who's sitting in between them, to go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," giggling mildly. Then jokes, "Jesus, how many years are you chicks away from menopause? Do sisters bleed out at the same time each month?" Hank then briefly burps, gets up off the couch, and heads into the kitchen to grab a cold Lagunitas IPA from the refrigerator. Walter and Tuco Salamanca, a nephew of Don Hector Salamanca from the cartel, have just recently begun working together. The demand for methamphetamine is on a ramp-up curve, and Jesse has more than enough time to cook with Walt and also get high with his friends. He advises to Walt that they come up with some other way to make money. Having demonstrated success with cooking in general, Jesse's affinity to unhealthy junk food makes him brainstorm that they start cooking and then selling a popular new snack. First, he thinks blue chips because they're the bomb, but Walt replies, "You've gotten so much dumber since high school. A name like that would draw attention to our drugs, you idiot," Walter says. But then he says, "But it's a smart idea," despite literally having just called Jesse himself dumb. How about something catchy, something akin to what people are already familiar with? We make it salty, crunchy, flavorful. We call it popcorners. And then again, like with gray matter, as he had developed alongside Gretchen and Elliot Schwartz, Walter White suggests the name for a brand new thing. Walter and Jesse are hard at work adjusting to a recipe that verifies a large fan base. Eventually, Walt does about 75% of the cook for a chip that highly impresses Jesse, which is the scene that would be shown in this Popcorners Breaking Good commercial. By coincidence, Tuco Salamanca is a convenient first customer to try the chip, as he was recently in the desert anyway to check in on things in regard to Walt and Jesse's meth cooking. It's a brilliant opportunity for Walt and Jesse to gather data about whether their new popcorners will be successful alongside their already successful methamphetamine. Acknowledging that the two customer bases might be different, however, meth heads could also enjoy popcorners without all popcorner lovers necessarily smoking meth. That's depicted in this video. The weird thing is that Walt says, "say their name," akin to how he would later say to Declan, threateningly, "say my name," eliciting an acknowledgement that Walter was actually the decorated drug lord Heisenberg. This scene also gives another example of Tuco Salamanca's violent outbursts, psychotic demeanor, and tendency to fall into laughter when in a good mood. What's also interesting about this scene is the way Tuco says, "We're gonna eat a lot of snacks together." This remark, and the way he said it, clearly would weird out Jesse, as shown, but it's akin to how he would eventually, less weirdly, say to Walt and Jesse regarding the meth, "We're gonna make a lot of money together." In that moment, before Tuco Salamanca would become Walt's meth manager, Tuco would right now become Walt's popcorner manager. And after Walt and Jesse exchange a bit of a glance about Tuco's strange comment and about eating a lot of snacks together, Jesse says to Walt, Okay, Mr. White, I think we've done a shit ton of cooking today, man. I'm gonna go home and get some rest. Tuco ends up sharing the beloved popcorners with No-Dose and Gonzo, revealed to be two characters in his gang. Eventually, his violent meth friends who report to him and help him sell meth and make money. Essentially, those would be those two people, No-Dose and Gonzo. Upon eating one of the chips, No-Dose is impressed. He ponders for a minute, then coincidentally leaves to the bathroom to take a shit, closing the door behind him. Sitting on the toilet, far enough away from Tuco that neither he nor Gonzo can hear, he gives Walt a phone call where the show leaves it up to the viewer to decide how No-Dose already has Walt's number. At the time, Walt has nearly opened the front door of his home after a long day of batching both blue meth and popcorners. His phone immediately buzzes and the dialogue goes as follows. Walt. Hi. Who is this? And then No-Dose says, Hey, homeboy, don't worry about it. I had your fucking popcorner chip. And Walt replies, Yeah? Do you reckon we sell both the meth and the chips? Finally, No-Dose remarks, Yeah, man, I'm down. Just remember who you're baking for. No-Dose violently slaps his phone shut with his pants still down, ending the call with Walt. Weird how similarly No-Dose's follow-up remark would be in the next episode, in which No-Dose was inappropriately remarked to Walt, Just remember who you're working for, after a successful meth transaction between Walt and Tuco. Walt's eyes roll, but not in the typical way of being irritated by someone, but rather in a confused way, as though he were bewildered and taken off guard by how he had just been threatened about who his popcorner boss was by someone other than his actual popcorner boss. The scene cuts away to a man who we'd eventually known as Tuco Salamanca, Tuco's uncle, Tio, who's sitting in a sunlit, illuminated living room of a shack in the desert. We'd later see this environment in Season 2, Episode 2, in which Walt and Jesse are essentially held hostage by Tuco in the minutes before they try feeding him a poisonous burrito to kill him. Tio is watching telenovelas, but we don't get too many details about the TV program because the shot is mostly on Tio, who is breathing irregularly and holding some medical straw underneath his nose. Apparently he cannot talk, and we confirm that in later episodes. The front door is abruptly heard, with the sound of a key unlocking it, and nephew Tuco rushes in to say, Tio, mira, mira, with subtitles showing, Tio, look, look. Tuco then whips out a blue bag of popcorners. Tuco then pushes a popcorner chip into Tio's mouth, with Tio opening his mouth just in time, so as not to have there just be like some accident between the popcorners and Tio's mouth. Like they actually go into his mouth because he fucking opened it just in time. Tio slowly chews the chip for about 4 seconds, then freezes. Immediately, the bell ringing becomes persistent, insane, constant. Tuco interprets this to mean that the uncle is furious with the chip and hates it so much that he won't even let whoever made it keep making it. Tuco finds this out via the following exchange. No te gusta, tío? As in, you don't like it? Hector rings his bell one time. Ding! Do you hate that shit, Tio? Ding! Weird, Tio. I think they're tight. They call this shit popcorners, Tio. I like them. Do you want other people eating these chips, Tio? Do you want to kill the people who made these chips, Tio? Ding! Okay, calm down, Tio. I'll tell them they can't keep making that shit. I can't stop someone else from making it, though, Tio. But I'll make sure they only make meth for me. No more popcorners, Tio. Does that sound good? Ding! So then, popcorners would continue to get sold, but Tuco Salamanca would level set with Walter via a phone call about no longer making popcorners. It's implied that popcorners were transferred to another distributor because Walt and Jesse were pleased with the chip and the headway they had begun to make with Tuco, but they feared for their lives if they continued to batch it themselves. It's also implied that the phone call was taken while Skylar wasn't home, because Walt had simply heard the phone call while watching NFL football and drinking a Lagunitas IPA, and he didn't seem spooked or nervous about who was calling. All we hear is Walt listening to Tuco and then saying to him, Okay, Tuco, you have my word. No more popcorners. Only methamphetamine. Tuco immediately hangs up, and Walt looks down at the kitchen counter for about 30 seconds, before slowly returning to the living room for more football. In the final scene, Jesse shows up at Badger's home with 5 joints, 2 grams of blue methamphetamine, a pack of cigarettes, and 3 blue bags of popcorners. "Wanna chill, bro? I got this dope-ass new snack. Now we got dope meth and dope snacks." Badger says, "Yeah, I'm down, bro, but it's gonna be hard to beat the meth. Guessing the blue meth is probably more impressive than the snacks, but show me what you got." Jesse replies, "Bro, Mr. White and I call them fucking popcorners. They're fire, yo. Grab 5. Jesse tears open the bag so fast that his phone falls to the ground, which he had been holding in the same hand. He's crazily opened the bag of popcorners with the same level of excitement as though he had been opening a bag of Walter White's blue meth. His phone screen shatters, but by coincidence it also starts ringing. Badger grabs a hold of the bag and starts munching, saying, "Dude, you're right. Those are the bomb. These are the bomb. Almost as good as the meth." Jesse picks up his phone and then picks up the call, but the shot pivots to Walt, who says, "You and I aren't doing popcorners anymore. Only meth. I found someone else to pick it up. Don't worry about why." Jesse says, "But why, Mr. White?" Walt replies, "We can make more money if we spend our time on the meth, which could ramp up in the near future. I can't believe I'm saying this, but less junk food and more quality meth." Jesse giggles as Walt hangs up the phone. Badger remarks, "Who was that, bro?" Jesse says, "Don't worry about it, LOL. Apparently these are the last popcorners we're going to be eating for a minute, so enjoy them and let's get high as hell." Then we would think of that scene ending. The whole scene ending and the whole episode ending. So, if we were to have an episode described as though I had described it, we would say that the Breaking Good episode would be symbolic, because multiple future episodes would then have similar remarks, but in regard to the meth itself, rather than being references to popcorners as are in this episode. This essentially is a one-off episode. It's kind of like Peekaboo with the neglected boy in the living room, where we don't really ever see him again. We don't really hear about the popcorners again. But it adds to the show by providing more context around how much Tuco Salamanca respects his uncle, to the extent that he would make Walter comply with an order to stop cooking popcorners, simply because of how much Tio apparently had hated the popcorners, despite them being well-loved in America today, simply cooked by people other than Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. They can be sold to Brandon Mayhew, who is still alive, as well as any other customers, although those other customers might not care for blue meth regardless of its potency due to legal and moral reasons. However, they still might very much enjoy fucking popcorners.